In today's world, we are increasingly dependent on technology. Our business and personal lives rely on it, but as you've probably noticed, it's unreliable. They promise it'll get better, but it usually gets worse. Our computers are slow, so we end up squinting at smartphones and tablets. We live in constant fear that something's going to happen to our personal data, so we're scared into paying for fake protection that proves useless when disaster strikes. Update attacks, fake Wi-Fi, cloud control, and other industry scandals are designed to keep the money flowing. The jokers we pay to fix our stuff have no clue what they're doing, so they do a virus scan and then wipe out our precious photos. Intelligent, successful people feel intimidated by the chaos and think it's somehow their fault. If they only knew what the industry was doing to them, they'd get torches and pitchforks. If only we had someone to explain it all in plain English so we can start protecting ourselves. Oh wait, we do! It's the Computer Exorcist Podcast with your host, Mark Anthony Arena.
From the Wallace Memorial microphone in my home office, overlooking the can of worms in downtown Rochester, New York, this is the Computer Exorcist Podcast. My name is Mark Anthony Arena. I am so glad you joined me here today. We have another very special guest today. Jenny Tiffany, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, just absolutely. I am so excited to talk to you. A couple weeks back, I was on Reddit, and it is a forum of forums, and there's all sorts of hobbies, and one of them is about cassette tapes. And y'all probably aren't surprised that I'm into cassette tapes again, because I am a contrarian, right? Where here we are with, on my show, I always talk about new technology, it's all new, and it's all garbage, and it's all so hastily made, and it's all cloud controlled, and none of it's going to last, right? If y'all have old video games or vinyl records or cassette tapes, those are eternal. They are not controlled by someone. They will never be deliberately destroyed by someone like Sonos speakers or Apple iPads. They are not tethered to the factory. They are yours eternally. So 20, 30 years from now, if the whole world ends, those cassette tapes and those NES cartridges are still going to work. So anyway, Jenny puts up a post and says, hey, I just came out with this new album and I'm releasing it on cassette. And I didn't even listen to it. I just clicked buy, and I wanted to support her, and the little design looked so cool. So, okay, Jenny, tell us about yourself and how you came to produce and record the music and design the cover and do everything to produce a cassette tape in 2024.
I've always loved cassettes, and I've always loved music, and it's interesting. I was totally agreeing with everything you were saying. I saw a old quote from an interview with Steve Albini recently, since he just passed, and he was talking about why he recorded music to tape, and he was like, because he just, he recorded all of his bands to tape, and he was like, tape is eternal. It'll still be here when all of us are gone. I just love analog forms of music, vinyl, cassette, CD. I have all my favorite albums on as many physical formats as I can.
Oh man. To my own detriment, my whole closet is full of them too.
Yeah. And I've always loved music. I'm a designer. I get paid to do design work. That's my real 9-to-5 job. And so music has always been a hobby, because as we all know, it's really hard to make money from music, but it's what I feel passionate about.
Yeah.
So I've been making music and playing in bands since I was in my 20s. And then, as you get older, it's harder to find people to play music with that you jive, you have the same music interests. So I started just doing it all on my own. And now, with technology, and even though I love analog, technology does enable you to do so much.
And that's a great point, because I am quite prone to becoming a Luddite and saying all technology is evil, and you'll hear me say that on most older episodes, but
Yeah.
But you got to remember, and that's a huge thing, right? That a lot of people think, well, if I don't like what's going on out there, I'm just going to go live in the woods. And it's okay. Look, there is a way forward. Not all technology is bad. There is good stuff like podcasting. There's no evil controls. There's no DRM on it, right? So there is a way forward with certain good technologies, right? I want to be able to work from my laptop from anywhere in the world. And so I call it the divergence, right? The digital divergence, where some greedy people and some control freaks lick their lips, right? And they got a fork and a knife, like in the cartoons, and they saw this as a great opportunity to control people and milk them for money. But don't let that discourage you, because believe me, I do let it discourage me.
Yeah. It's interesting, technology, especially the whole AI art, the things that are going on right now. It's really interesting because, at the same time that I'm sure when people started doing, I started doing originally just doing painting with actual paints, but then I started learning digital illustration, and I'm sure there were a lot of people that were upset by people using Illustrator and Photoshop, to make art at first. And so I have mixed feelings about AI art, because some people use it as a tool to still create, it's a tool just like Illustrator and Photoshop. But yeah, I don't know. I'm unsure how I feel about it. But as far as music goes, I don't know, there's so many awesome tools, and it's you don't have to, when I first started, you would have to book time in a studio to record, or have your friend, or get a 4-track recorder and record. And now you can just be in your home office, your bedroom, and record a whole album, and it's amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible. And side note, since you're a designer, I'm also working on a project that I've been working on for way too long, a home theater PC, right, a streaming device for PC. And for some reason, I've always been attracted to early 90s pastel IT user guides. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
They were all pastel, those soft colors. Let's see, I mean, HP, and what was the other one that was huge? Sun Microsystems. And I actually have a whole folder on my computer that I'll show you someday if we ever. And they're all these cartoons. Remember the original Netgear products were all cartoons, and they have this soft pastel thing to them.
Yeah, pastels are nice. I'm a color designer. Actually, that's what I do. And color theory, color is also a huge part of my life. And colors, there's definitely a lot of psychology about how colors affect people, and nostalgia around colors, and textures. And that's why I like making the cassette tapes. When I was first recording the music and releasing it, it was, it's easy to release it digitally, but I found so much more, I'm just getting a way bigger audience if people can actually buy it and physically own the music and experience it that way. And so when I figured out that I wanted to try to do it on vinyl, and it was just way too expensive for an independent musician who doesn't have a huge following to try to afford to do, release their music on vinyl. So cassette is so affordable, and it's so easy. And I have a Cricut machine, which I can cut all of my own, like, score and cut all my J cards and my labels. And so it's just like amazing to be able to just like imagine how you want it. And there's a company in Canada called Duplication, and they have like every color cassette shell you could ever want, and they'll basically load it with the exact amount of time of tape that you want. So you can, so after I, you know, have my little EP or album ready, I think it's great because mine are usually pretty short. They're like between 6 and 8 songs, my little releases. So it's like the perfect amount to have both, have the whole thing on each side. And I do it like close to the perfect amount of time so that when you get done listening to the side, you can just flip it over and listen to it again.
Wow. Yeah. Well, if your other albums are anywhere near as good as this one, I'm gonna buy them all. And I mean, I put this thing into my tape player, and I am so in love with it. It's 80s synth pop. Is that what you describe it?
Yeah, I think I tried it. It's like heavy synth pop leaning, and then there's also sort of some post-punk guitar influences, kind of like New Order-ish, and then a little bit of psychedelic pop kind of thrown in.
Wow.
So
there was another group, I think it was called St. Lucia, I want to say, if that rings a bell. And it was...
Yeah,
it was like made in 2005 or some modern year like that, but it was 80s sounding. And I love that today, right now, even though it's not the 80s, we can make stuff that's still true to that.
I know, I love capturing that like nostalgia of that era, but putting like a little bit of a modern spin on it.
The 80s are alive and well, certainly in my heart. Oh, my little cousins are going to hear this episode, and they love teasing me. Mark, not everything is great in the 80s, Mark. It's not for you. How come you always say the 80s?
Oh, the 80s was pretty great.
Absolutely, design-wise especially. I don't know about the haircuts, but the music. Oh, and the cars.
There was so much crazy stuff, too. Like, if you just think about Alf.
Yeah.
Like, the whole concept of Alf and that was a show, like, that's how weird the 80s was.
and come on, Knight Rider. I'm showing my best buddy's kids Knight Rider right now.
Yes.
Oh,
there were so many weird 80s shows.
Oh, it's so incredible. I can't even begin to... So, you know, you bring up a really good point with analog cassettes and vinyl, right? I mean, obviously, I buy a single now. I buy it as an MP3. I don't do those streaming services. I want it. It's mine, and it's mine forever. So I buy the MP3s, and that's awesome. And I'll make a playlist of my recent purchases. But when you have something in your hand, a cassette or a vinyl or even a CD, it is what Richard Hammond calls a sense of occasion, right? It's a special event, just like going to Blockbuster was 30 years ago. It's a special event. You don't fast forward and flip-flop around. And Neil Young mentioned this years ago, and he said, with this MP3 stuff, it's just destroyed the music industry. He said it destroyed your experience. I have your cassette. I put it in, and I have to listen to all of it, and it forces me to sit down. I mean, as much as I love on-demand television shows and whatever, there's something about, even like 4 years ago, they were airing Frasier on a TV channel in a nearby city, and I was able to pick it up, and it's like, okay, I totally don't have to do this. I have all the DVDs, but coming home and knowing Frasier was airing at a certain time, it's a special occasion.
Yeah, this is really nice. Yeah, definitely. Like, I had gotten rid of a lot of the cassettes that I had, like, growing up. And so, like, when I recently started, like, getting back into cassettes, because I'm heavy into vinyl, and I was just like, I love cassettes, and I have a lot of old mixtapes. So I started pulling them out and listening to them, and I was just remembering, like, the feeling of, like, you know, getting a new cassette and, like, looking at all the art and like reading the lyrics, and like it's like a total experience, and you can't just like you can't just like skip around, you know. It's really like great for the musician because somebody can experience, like, when I put together the songs, like it's like a journey, and like there's an order to it, and it should be heard as one thing. So I think it's really great for artists to be able, for people to be, you know, really truly experience their album as it should be.
Oh, yeah, I would love, in the 90s, I'd buy an album, right, and I'd listen to the whole thing through, and that would turn me on to those deep tracks, as they call them, right? The tracks that won't make it to the radio and won't make it to the top charts. Yeah, and what was it? So Our Lady Peace, and how about Coheed and Cambria? You ever hear of them?
No. I've got a lot of new bands to experience.
I can't wait to hear what you think of them. And in both cases, the albums are meant to be a journey, right? Especially with Coheed. It's prog metal, and they do a theme throughout. And same thing, I'm a big prog rock guy. Okay, so we're going to put you in the hot seat on the Computer Exorcist show. Autoweek.com. This is from May 4th, 2021. I'm a little behind in my briefcase. So what I do here is I read an article and I want to get your opinion on it. And this is weird because it might not seem relevant to you at first, but you'll get it when I get there. Okay. Autoweek.com. Some California EV owners allegedly switch back to gas. 20% of EV owners in California replaced their cars with gas ones, a new study shows. The main reason was the inconvenience of charging. Much of the research, however, is 9 years old. 70% lacked access to level 2 charging at home and at the workplace. Okay. I mean, think about if you're in an apartment or you park on the street, and what are you going to do? Level 2 charging at home can happen with any 240-volt outlet, so you could steal power from your washer and dryer. You don't need those. Some installation service might be needed to install a charging station, but most homes are already capable. Sure. The study didn't say why 4 out of 5 stuck with EVs, though. Infrastructure growth of DC fast charging will continue to grow rapidly in years to come, especially with support from the Biden administration, although I had a bunch of EV stocks, and for whatever reason, the Biden administration did not make my EV stocks rise, so I'm disappointed. It does not mean the technology will fail, but it is not yet the right solution for all buyers. Okay, that's right. It's early adopters, right? This could slow plug-in electric vehicle market growth and make reaching 100% of sales more difficult. So, a couple of points here. Number one, the buddy of mine taught me about the adoption curve, right? Where, okay, a new thing comes out, a bunch of people adopt it relatively quickly, but then the, what do they call, obsolescence curve, in other words, the people who stick with the old stuff, tapers off very slowly. I'll give you an example. This morning I was at a rummage sale at my church, and they had 4 beta VCRs that people just donated last week or something, and I love that, and I wish everyone would use beta forever, and I really should have bought them, but I already have 2 beta VCRs. But the point is, this stuff, right, like, a lot of people will adopt something quickly, like Spotify, let's say, but they keep their cassettes for longer, and they have their cassettes and their betas in the closet for a long time. So my whole thing, and I say this in my book, it's called How to Protect Yourself from Your Computer, and I'll certainly send you one if you like. That's your consolation prize for being. But why? I love preservation, right? And newer is not always better, right? They try to shove stuff down our throats all the time. This is new, and therefore it's good. And look, newer could be good or bad, but just because there's a today's date on it doesn't mean it's better. So just have some critical thinking, folks. Better is better. And finally, if you watch Harry's Garage on YouTube, he's a car guy, and he's a really super nice guy, and he drives cars around Europe and truly enjoys them. And he says, look, it turns out the real problem with the harming the environment is producing cars over and over and over and more, put them in the garbage after a year or two, and that's what a lot of people do. He says, look, I got a lot of old cars, and they might have big engines, but I use them rarely, and they're already produced, he says, and they're already there. So they're actually more environmentally friendly. That I have a 20-year-old car, same deal. I'm just going to keep fixing it, and it's stupid simple to fix it. Yeah. So, what do you think?
I agree.
Awesome.
I agree. I feel like it's just like a product of capitalism that corporations just try to put the burden of the environment on the consumer when it's their burden. They're the problem, you know, they're the ones producing the lion's share of the waste and causing all of the problems, but they like make us feel like we should be, you know, doing all these little things. To, I mean, not to say that it isn't helpful, like, but you know what I mean?
Right, like little tiny savings, like put and the IT industry does it too, like shames. Yeah. Or having stop start. That's actually the most damaging thing you could ever do to an engine, that auto stop start, and it saves a quarter per month. Right, it saves 25 cents a month. That's a really good point. Yeah. So they're making us, what do you call it, split hairs, right?
Yeah.
When there's the majority of, and I always say this almost every episode, I say the real problem is all the HP printers that die after a week and then you throw them away.
Printers are the worst.
HP, and also HP. All the landfills of the whole earth are basically just HP printers right now.
Printers. Yeah, I would believe it. Printers it's funny. My partner and I were just talking about how out of all of the like the technology that we like interact with, printers are the ones that we have like spent the most, like have wasted the most of our like time and energy, like trying to get work, you know, to work correctly and like just troubleshoot. And like I'm an illustrator and I print my own art prints at home. So I have like a big Canon like printer, fancy printer. But so anytime I get a new like laptop, it's insane. Like even though I'll save my settings and have it all dialed, it's never works.
No,
it never ever works. And we spend like days, like, you know, trying to figure it out. And yeah, I feel like printers, like a friend of mine has an older father who's kind of a hoarder. And he like collects printers and he's like, these are going to be worth money. And I'm like, no, printers are like losing money the minute they're produced. They're just like worthless.
Yeah, you know, I collect a lot of things that I think are going to be worth money, but even I know printers probably won't. Although they might be worth something to if they're good ones for people using vintage computers, because guess what? It's that treadmill, right? Hey, guess what? Jenny just bought a new laptop, but oh, sorry, too bad, you're not allowed to use that printer anymore, right? So it's a climbing.
That's true.
But I like what you're saying. You know, they punish us with the straws, but then meanwhile the cars and the printers are being produced. And you know what, too, is I believe it's up to us to resist, right? It's up to us to just not buy this stuff, right? Unfortunately, with the Apple products, you're force attacked to buy something new all the time. But with cars, for the moment at least, you can keep your car for as long as you want. And I'm all in favor of just buying a bunch of old cars and just using them.
I have my car that is a 2014 that I have paid off, and I'm just going to drive that car until I can't anymore. Like, you know, it's still running fine. And I'll just like, I agree.
Yeah, and that's another huge thing. You notice how after you pay off a car, it's just that much more comfortable to sit in it?
Yeah.
That's the greatest luxury, right? It's not the paying more and getting the features and whatever, and the massagers. No, it's the greatest luxury is having a car that's yours.
Yeah.
And not costing,
you don't have to pay anything anymore.
Yeah. Oh, a couple of things I was going to bring up. Like, honestly, I mean, I got rid of my tapes and records, whatever, when I was little, and was almost going to get rid of my CDs. But then this whole movement came up. And for me, I mean, for a lot of people, it's about being cool or enjoying the sense of occasion. But for me, it's so personal because I work 12 hours a day in this industry. And they're always, like I said, slamming stuff down our throats. And they want us to buy new and buy new and buy new. So for me, it's that simple, that finiteness, right, of sitting down and putting a beta tape in the machine and just enjoying something, and it helps me concentrate. You know, when there's not an infinite flood of subscription, you know, it's finite. Yes. It's that, and that's all it is. And maybe it brings me back to where I was a kid, and maybe, I don't know, I'll have to ask young people if it does that for them, even though they never had that experience before.
Yeah.
But so for me as a contrarian, all of a sudden I'm starting to do stuff just out of spite, right? So my cousin,
like, cassette it.
and I want to go back to, actually I say this all the time, like I want to go back to a Model T because they're easy to fix. I want a VW Beetle and a Model T, and I don't want computers at all.
Yeah.
And especially like recently, my Chrysler engine died earlier this year, but I found a guy, and for the first time in my life, I'm driving a car that's past 100,000 miles because he rebuilt the thing, and he's like, dude, you're totally fine, and keep going with life. Where before I would get afraid because they'd start causing trouble around that point. So a lot of what I do, right, I'm getting my best buddy's kids and my own nephews and my friends' kids and whatever into vintage NES games and Atari, and there's a game called Metropolis 1998, and there's Retro Bowl, and these are modern games produced today, but they're 80s graphics, right?
Wow. That's cool.
And there's this group on Facebook that I love. Not that I rarely go on there anymore, but there's something called Undesired Survivors, and it talks about just ordinary people submitting pictures of their old 80s cars, but they're not collector's items, $100,000 muscle cars. It's like their grandma's Buick. Yeah, and it's worth a grand, but it's so simple and reliable, and it gives them that beautiful nostalgia, even if it's worth a grand or two, but to them it means the world.
Yeah. I see people driving old cars and I'm always jealous. I'm like, there's so many great old cars, just like even like old like BMWs or old like old trucks, like old Datsun trucks. I'm always see like nice old Datsun trucks, that are like brown with like orange like 80s stripes, and I'm just like, that is amazing. I wish I had that truck. Like old trucks like that. Like a friend of mine used to lend us his old pickup truck, and it had like this long bed, and you could fit like a whole sheet of plywood in it, and you could haul so much stuff, and it was amazing. And it got stolen in front of my house, and we were so sad. But like things like that are just awesome. Like they just work, and they do what they're supposed to do. They're easy to fix. Yeah.
That's another point, too. The user interface, right? As a designer, you know this, right? When I get in a car, I don't know how I'm going to do 5-10 years from now if I have to buy a new car or something. My dad and I rented a new car a couple months back to drive to Carolina, and pop-ups, and it's shaming you. Shame on you. We don't think you're driving well enough. You should pull over and take a nap. Who do you think you are?
That's terrible.
Right?
Yeah. I heard about this woman who was trapped in her Tesla that was like updating in like 100-degree weather for like, I think it was trapped for like 40 minutes or an hour or something. And because if she were to like open it or get out while it's doing this, it could damage it. So she almost like died trapped in her stupid Tesla.
That's huge. So many points you bring up. So I'm a big fan of Tesla. However, I wish they would rip all the computers out. And that's what I was going to say about this article, too, is, look, I'm fine with EVs as long as we don't have the punishing and the control. And I rage about update attacks every episode, how updates can only destroy and they can never do anything for you. And I bet you anything, you could have probably opened the doors. With a computer, you're not supposed to unplug it during an update because the firmware might be damaged. Okay, fine. She probably could have opened the doors, but guess what?
Probably.
This industry is so ultra complex and intimidating. It's all myth, rumor, legend, hearsay, and superstition and fear.
Yeah, and you don't know, so you're just like, okay, I guess I'll sit here and roast to death.
Sit here and roast while my car does an update attack. Wow, I didn't hear about that particular example, but wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And it kind of makes me, it's funny, like, I was a fan of things getting better, right? Tech used to get better. 70s, you had the square headlights, and then the 80s, they were rounded, and then the 90s, they were a little rounded, right? And so for me, back in 30 years ago, I'd be like, oh, those cars are gross. I like the 90s cars. They're better. Okay, and I personally do prefer them. But when I look at this Undesired Survivors Club, I go, you know what? I would much rather have that fugly 80s Buick Woody wagon than anything else today, because it has a steering wheel and an AM and FM radio, and that's it, and maybe a heater.
Yeah, I miss having a tape deck in the car, because you always had a tape deck, and it was awesome. You could always, like, even I remember, like, having a tape deck in my car, and, like, once, if you wanted to listen to CDs, you could put that like tape in the CD player and like connect it to your like Discman and listen to CDs through the tape player. Like, it was just great being able to like.
The luxury cars had a cassette and a CD.
Ooh, fancy.
You know what's hysterical, Jenny? Like 10 years ago, these things would have been worth $1. I'm looking on eBay right now. They're going anywhere from $75 to $332. These car tape decks.
Oh yeah, everything that's like cassette related now. I mean, like people used to like throw cassettes away, and thrift stores weren't even like taking them anymore. And now, like to buy used cassettes on eBay, it's like they're anywhere, and then you have to pay shipping. They're anywhere from like $8 to like $30, depending on if it's like something that's hard to find. Like I don't know if you like or have heard of the band the Cocteau Twins. They're like a big post-punk band from the 80s, 90s, and they're one of their most famous albums, Heaven or Las Vegas. Somebody posted like an eBay auction that was, I think they had found a bunch of 90s tapes that were like, new old stock, probably from a tape shop that had closed down a long time ago, or a music shop. So they had all these like still sealed like 90s cassette tapes. And I was watching that auction for that tape, and it ended up selling for like $60. It was insane. I was like, wow. So all of that is like so desirable now. And there's just been like a huge resurgence of like younger people being interested in cassette tapes, which is really great.
Oh, that's just so cool. And sometimes you'll go on eBay and someone will just throw a number out there and they'll ask for that. And that doesn't mean they're going to get it, right? But so you're saying it was an auction.
It was like multiple people were like driving it up and wanted it, and then it sold. And I was like, I can't pay that much for it. But the thing that's awesome also about cassettes is that you can record your own. Like if you want that album on cassette, you can buy a high quality cassette and record it yourself and enjoy it. And it's so great. You can fix them also. Like most cassette shells have little screws. Like I had a cassette tape that was from an old recording from one of my first bands, and I went to try to listen to it and the tape had broken. So I opened it up and spliced the tape back together, and it worked. So you can like fix it.
Yeah, I had an uncle who would splice his own tapes, and cassette culture, the subreddit, if y'all want to go on Reddit and join that, as well as CRT gaming, by the way, about old televisions. That's my other thing. But you'll see a lot of people on there talking about, hey, you know what? I made myself a mixtape with some modern songs. I wanted it on a cassette so that I could go, right, like I just got a back deck put in, and I just go out there, and it's my finite place, my isolated world with no distractions and no whatever. So people make themselves a tape for that purpose. Moral of the story, folks, keep all your old stuff. Don't get rid of anything. It'll be worth it someday. It'll be true.
Yeah, I was getting really into like all my old mixtapes, so I started. And also, since I was making my own music and releasing on a cassette, I opened up a Etsy shop. It's called Orbit 92 Tapes. And so I started selling mixtapes. I have like 6 volumes right now. There's like a new wave one, a post-punk one, an electronic music one, and then I decided to do some color-themed mixtapes, so I just released, there's a blue-themed one, a gold-themed one, and a pink. So all the songs are like pink-themed, and I designed all the colors, and the tapes, of course, match the color, and it's really fun. So I've been starting to make some sales, and I think it seems like there's interest for that.
Wow. Yeah. Please, everyone, go out there and support this sweet lady here. She's just so awesome. So what is the address of your Etsy site, and how can people buy your stuff?
Oh, yeah. So I put music out under Postmodern Magic, and you can find it on Bandcamp, Postmodern Magic. And then my Etsy shop is Orbit 92 Tapes.
Postmodern Magic over on Bandcamp, and also Orbit 92 Tapes on Etsy.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And any final thoughts?
Just that analog forever.
That's right. Well, I mean, and it's, my dad, when I was little, we had all the records, and we even had reel-to-reels and everything. And
I would love to have a reel-to-reel player.
We sold all our reel-to-reels in the early 2000s, but it was kind of a good thing because we got a good buck for them, and they're not decaying anymore, so someone's gonna enjoy those.
Also takes up a lot more space too.
Oh yeah, it did. Yeah. So I am thecomputerexorcist.com. Tell your friends about the show. Thanks so much for joining, and we will talk to y'all next week.